I'm Carleen Beshen. I am a 30-year veteran of the classroom. I worked in Madison schools from 1983 till 2016 with a little break for 5 years in the middle there when I lived in North Carolina. And I retired, as I said, in 2016. I survived barely Act 10 and all of everything that happened there. And I actually got into Fair Maps work, doing things with the Wisconsin Public Education Network. I went to lots and lots of joint committee on finance hearings in different parts of the state to testify. I guess the first time I testified was actually at Act 10. And then to testify on the need to improve the funding formula for public education in general, and realized that the committee was a reflection of the gerrymander in the state assembly. So when I retired, I did other kinds of political work, and then actually after the 2018 election, one of the people in the little group that I'm part of said, "It's the maps, we gotta fix the maps." And I said to her, we're like 12 people, yeah, like what are we gonna do about the maps? And she said, we need to do something, let's have a summit. So, to see what can happen with a summit. We did, we had a summit in Marshfield, 2.5 hours from any place in the state. And we figured, we could do it in Dane County where we live, but quite frankly, a lot of people come to something in Dane County, but then they go home and they complain about it. But if we do it in the middle of the state where people can come from all over the state, and our idea was to get the grassroots folks involved, right? So grass tops, what we call, the head of Common Cause, the League, all those folks. If legislators hear from them and they're not so keen on that organization, they can just say, oh, well, that was JHEC, oh, that was Deborah Crummeller. But they hear from the members of those organizations, the 30,000 members of Common Cause, the probably even more members of the League of Women Voters, and they're like, we got a lot of people calling us on this. And so that was what we did. We had national and state experts come in and talk to us, and then we had action workshops. How to lobby your legislator, how to bird dog your legislator, how to use the media, earned media, social media, all kinds of media. How to recruit and organize volunteers, and how to use relational organizing. So out of that, I was hired as the grassroots organizer for the Fair Maps Coalition. Our goal in the Fair Maps Coalition, as you can see, representative government for all, which includes independent and nonpartisan redistricting, fair and accountable judiciary, and fair and equal access to voting. These are the members of the LEAD team, those grass tops organizations that guide the work that happens at the grassroots level. Wisconsin Public Education Network is part of that LEAD team. And in this presentation, I'm going to quickly go over what's happened in the past and where we are now. Okay, so it's so just to give you some historical perspective, the last time there was collaboration between the parties in creating maps was in 1971. That was just after a Supreme Court ruling that said that all districts, congressional districts, and then legislative districts at the state level had to have the same number of people. Not the same number of voters, the same number of people in them. And so after the next decennial census, there was collaboration between the parties. They really had to figure this out. It was new. They'd been approximately the same before, but the parameters were much tighter. Then in 1981, 91, and 2001, there was split government. In other words, the two chambers of the legislature and the governor, I don't know what the configurations were, but they were split. I could go back, but that minutia would go out of my brain. The bottom line was they couldn't agree, and federal courts ended up deciding our maps. So I was in middle school. Lou Alcindor who is now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, played for the Bucks, gives you just a little bit of perspective. And then came 2010, right? But it's really important to know that just before 2010, when a Republican trifecta was elected, Democrats had a trifecta. They had the governor, the assembly, and the state senate, and they had an opportunity to pass nonpartisan redistricting legislation. They took a pass. They looked at this map, they said, we're going to draw a max in 2010. Why would we give that opportunity away? So instead, they decided to take a pass on that. And so just for context, we have a very purple state. These are Supreme Court election results back over the years. The last two before 2023, very mixed results. This is the 2023 result. So we go back and forth and back and forth. We also know that voters, when they are asked the question, want a nonpartisan process. In 2019, 72% of the population wanted a nonpartisan process, and in 2020, 70% identified wanting a nonpartisan process. Our reality, our Constitution says that the state legislature is responsible for our maps. It does not say they draw them, we all know they don't. Right? They have to pass them, but they don't do the drawing themselves. The governor either signs those maps into law or vetoes them. We as voters have no ballot initiative, direct ballot initiative, where we can pass an amendment directly and change our state's constitution. So we can't do that. We've passed lots of referendums, but now even that is not an option for us. In the shared revenue bill back in 2023, one of the stipulations in the shared revenue bill was to strip that opportunity from voters to pass advisory referendum on state issues. So you can pass advisory referendum on local issues, you can pass referendum to spend more money on your school district or on your municipality, but you can't pass advisory referendum on statewide issues. So now we've lost that as, so there's been marijuana referendums, there's been fair maps referendums, there's been all kinds of things that people have passed at a county and a municipal level. We can't do that anymore. So public education and awareness is our tool to empower voters to make their voices heard. So just a few of the things that the coalition does. There's a legal strategy. Law Forward, who is also here today, is part of that legal strategy. There's the lobbying portion, so Wisconsin conservation voters, League of Women voters, they talk a lot to government folks about issues, not about elections, but about issues. Wisconsin Democracy Campaign does as well. And then the grassroots activism level, which is what I'm most focused on. In that work, as I said, we passed lots of referendums and resolutions. The dark counties here passed both. A resolution at the board level and voters passed a referendum. The lighter counties passed resolutions at the board level. Interestingly, Marquette County was not interested in passing a resolution, but they were convinced that they should let the voters in their county make their voices heard, which was kind of interesting, right? They didn't want to take a stand, but they felt voters should have a voice. And then these dots are municipalities. The counties that are white have not passed anything. There have been attempts in Lafayette, Columbia, Waukesha, Ozaukee to get it, and Barron to get it on the ballot. Actually, high school student in Barron took it to the county board. They wouldn't pass it, but then he took it to the city of Barron and they did. He was in high school at the time, couldn't even vote. We also did a lot of work to support the work of the People's Maps Commission. Now, when Governor Evers was elected, he had money in his first budget to create a nonpartisan process. It was stripped out by that same Joint Finance Committee that I mentioned before. They took that money out. So he created a space for the People's Maps Commission by executive order. Folks applied to be, and these were all volunteers, applied to be part of that. They were vetted by retired circuit court judges. We have an emergency room doctor, an oncology doc, a Native American man who is dean of students, social studies teacher in Milwaukee, a librarian, head of the Urban League of Greater Madison, or Greater Madison, a healthcare professional, and I can't remember what the other two women do. Sorry. But suffice it to say, they all had professions that were not demographers, they were not geographers, they were not politicians, and they did this as volunteers. They held virtual hearings in each one of the congressional districts around the state. It was in the middle of COVID. The first part of the hearing was informational, them learning, people who tuned in on YouTube Live learning, and then the second part, hearing testimony from voters around the state, and specifically in those congressional districts. We held forums beforehand for people in those districts to say these are the issues, and we had experts from those areas talk about what were some of the issues in that congressional district, and then we also held trainings for how do you synthesize what you want to say into 3 minutes, so that you can. We just don't want to go in there and again say that the maps are gerrymandered. How does it affect you personally? So we did those things. Then when they went to the period of time when they were collecting maps, we did lots and lots and lots of trainings. We did mappy hours at bars, we did lunch and learns on Facebook Live, we did lots of things to train people how to use the District R program to create a map that reflected how they felt their community should be represented. And we helped folks upload more than 800 maps onto the People's Maps Commission portal. And then they went into the drafting phase of the maps. So we did a lot, everything we could to support them because they had no budget. We didn't have much of a budget either, but we had a lot of volunteers. Joe was part of that army of volunteers that helped us with those things. What happened next, Devin Drachla, who was in and then left, she knows all this, I was surprised to see her here, introduced legislation. We had a big rally about that. It didn't even get a public hearing. The commission held all those hearings. The census numbers came to the governor on August 12th of 2021, and the state legislature opened a portal. Now the portal for the People's Maps Commission had been open for like 6 months. The one for the state legislature was open for 6 weeks. And during that time, we had an army of volunteers, literally, who helped download the maps. We filed an open records request with District R, and they sent us all the emails for all the people who had submitted maps. We sent an email to them and said, please download your map from District R and then upload it to the legislature's portal. And if you don't want to do that, give us permission to do it. And so we did that, and we uploaded almost all of those 800 maps to the legislature's portal. But surprise, surprise, it closed 5 days later. SB 621, the even more gerrymandered maps were introduced and passed along party lines, in spite of the fact that only 2 people, Speaker Voss and Senate Leader LeMahieu, only 2 people testified in favor. We had more than 200 people there, 150 of them testified, 9 hours of testimony. Passed along party lines, and the governor vetoed them. So the next thing that happened is they went to court. And so, I could go into all of the gyrations that happened. The People's Maps Commission maps didn't really even get a look. The other maps had already been passed by the time that they were introduced. And so the governor, as I said, vetoed the maps. The GOP legislature didn't even try to override the veto. They went straight to the state Supreme Court, and in spite of the fact that in January of 2020, the Supreme Court had decided not to change the rule to be the court of original jurisdiction. In other words, things would go straight to them and skip all of the lower courts. In spite of the fact that they had decided not to change that rule in January of 2020, when the maps were appealed to them in November of 2021, they took the case. And they asked some questions. They said, should we consider partisanship and proportional representation? Should we consider how things are split? Should we use a least changes approach? Well, ironically, a least changes approach had passed by a joint resolution in September of 2021. And at the time, we were screaming and hollering in the Fair Maps Coalition, and we go, they're there. This is just a suggestion. It's not a law. And it's true, it's not a law. It didn't pass twice and then change our state's constitution. It's just a suggestion, but it's a suggestion that the Supreme Court took. That's what they decided to do. So if your maps are fair and you use a least changes approach, if they had done that in 2011, then we would have had relatively fair maps. But in 2011, 42% of the state's population was moved into a new district. And in 2021, the state Supreme Court decided to do a least change on these really horrible maps. So there was a lot of back and forth between the state Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court and the state Supreme Court. Bottom line, the U.S. Supreme Court said to the state Supreme Court, who had chosen the governor's least bad maps. They were the governor's maps, but they still had to adhere to that least change, so they were the least bad. The GOP leadership appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court took the governor's congressional maps, that's what's in effect now, and they sent the other maps back to the state Supreme Court and said, you haven't proven your case. Remember all that finding stuff I mentioned in the lower courts? You didn't really tell us why you chose these. There's a lot of homework that needs to be done on this before we can make a decision. And instead of doing that homework, they said, no, we'll just pass SB 621. The legislature's real worst least change map. So, that's where, those are the maps that were used in November of 2022. And here's some more about that. This is the timeline. But here's the impact. These are the issues. And I'm just going to give you these to pass around because those issues are reflected here. These are things, and you take more than one, please. Take everything that I give you, share it with other people. These are the issues that people care about that are not being addressed because the maps are so gerrymandered. And, you know, not surprisingly, major increase in state aid for special education. Not happening. Here are the results of statewide elections. The numbers of people that have voted in statewide elections going back to 2006. You can see that there are some years where more Democrats have voted, other years where the Republicans have earned more votes, but it's fairly evenly split over time. As a matter of fact, when this is all averaged out, 50.5% of the state votes Democratic, 49.5% of the state votes Republican. That's pretty even, pretty purple, but these are the results. So you can see in 08, 06, and 10, they went back and forth. In 2010, I'm sorry, in 06, 08, went back and forth. In 2010, Republicans won a majority in the state assembly. Democrats had a majority in 06, 08, and in 10, Republicans earned the majority. And then after that is a result of the gerrymander. This is what statewide elections look like. So this is 2006, 2010, 2014, 2018. Those are years when there were 5 statewide elections. Governor, Attorney General, Treasurer, Secretary of State, and U.S. Senator. So it goes back and forth. But in 2018, I'm sure you're all familiar, let's just take a look. All 5 offices, statewide elections, go to Democrats. And here's 2018 in the Assembly, 2018 in the Senate. Now, full transparency, when I vote blue. But that doesn't mean I think that all the seats should be blue. There should not be a blue gerrymander either. I believe that representation should look like the state. Oh, let me go back, like this. Representation should reflect the voters and the values of the voters. This is a gerrymander, and it impacts these issues that clearly are supported across party lines. So that's all to give you some history, some perspective on where we are right now. The maps played a huge part in the 2023 Supreme Court election. We, in the Fair Maps Coalition, that army of volunteers, sent out 15,000 postcards about the issues to BIPOC voters, Black, Indigenous, people of color voters who might not have voted in that election. We were not disappointed that having fair maps was an issue in that election, and the person who was willing to look at those maps won. And then the day after Justice Protasiewicz was sworn in, Law Forward filed a lawsuit. There were 5 things in their suit, 5 claims that they wanted the court to hear, and they were 3 partisan gerrymandering claims, a separation of powers claim. Remember how the legislature didn't try to override the veto, they just went straight to the court. And so separation of powers. And then the last one was on contiguity. The court said those 3 partisan gerrymandering claims, we can't hear those because they need more finding in those lower courts. You can't just come to us, have 45 minutes of presentation, argument, and expect us to really understand all those things. So they took the separation of powers and the contiguity. They made that decision and let us know that they would take the case on October 6th, and oral arguments were just before Thanksgiving last year on November 21st. On December 22nd, the last day of Friday at 3:45.
I know where I was, in Cargo Coffee and East Side when the news came.
I don't actually remember where I was, but I can tell you that Doug Pullen said it was going to be 4 o'clock and he was off by 15 minutes. Anyway, they declared that the maps were unconstitutional on non-contiguity grounds, and then they set in motion the next steps in the process. So parties had to submit maps. There were 6 maps presented or submitted to the court, and then that was by January 12th, and on February 1st, the experts whom they hired, who are nationally renowned and respected by Democrats and Republicans, independents, really, smart, strong people, issued a report. They said 2 of the maps submitted by the legislature and Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty were gerrymanders, no better than what we have now. And the other 4 submitted by the Clark petitioners, who Law Forward represented, mathematicians and computer scientists, the Democratic senators, and the governor, were relatively the same. There were some nuanced differences, but these were fair maps based on the criteria that the court had set out. They said, we can tweak them if you like, we can draw a whole nother set if you don't want to go with any of these, but these are the maps that you should choose from. Well, surprise, surprise, suddenly the legislature thinks that we should pass maps. And there were a lot of shenanigans. You might remember some of this. One was trying to pass the Iowa model, only the Iowa model with tweaks, and I'll talk about why that wasn't, even the Iowa model was not a good idea. Another was the governor's maps with a few changes, which really weren't a few changes. They really amounted to a lot of incumbent protection. And then finally, really, the governor's maps. Well, not surprisingly, there was a lot of mistrust, like, is this for real? Can we trust that the maps that are being passed are for real? And there was a clause that looked a little suspicious. Turned out the LRB, Legislative Reference Bureau, had put that into all the maps over time, and there was nothing smelly about it. So those maps were passed, again, surprisingly, along party lines. Republicans voted for it. Democrats did not. Democrats said, hey, we haven't had a public hearing on this. We really haven't. There's been no input from anybody else. You're just ramming this through. And we in the pro-democracy world said, pass the maps, pass the maps, pass the maps. This is about voters. We understand you want to have your time and maybe you like a different map, but this is about voters. And voters having fair representation, and we are running out of time. Plus, legislatively passed maps that are signed by the governor cannot be challenged by the legislature. They can't take maps they passed and the governor signed to court. Won't happen. So, we screamed and hollered, and there it was. That's me. Right next to the governor when he signed those maps into law on February 19th. And so, for this election, and probably 26 and 28 and 30, we have fair maps. That's a really wonderful thing, and I am so excited about that. I can get to the child. But we are not done. We need a permanent, independent, nonpartisan process. And so that is what we are working toward now. We need a process that takes legislators, politicians out of it. Yes, they have to approve it. The governor has to sign it. But they need to not be part of the process that creates those maps. Because this is, remember that 2008 map and the opportunity in 2009 that Democrats had to pass nonpartisan legislation and they didn't take it? This is a bipartisan power grab disease. And we know Illinois is gerrymandered by Democrats. Maryland was gerrymandered by Democrats. New York State was gerrymandered by Democrats. You don't have to be a Republican to gerrymander. They all do it. So that's why we at I'll come back to that. The League of Women Voters has an ad hoc redistricting committee, and we have been talking to the Brennan Center for Justice out of New York Law School. We have been talking, NYU Law School, New York University. The Campaign Legal Center, based in Washington, D.C., one of their lawyers, who is actually originally from Wisconsin, argued the Clark case in front of the Supreme Court, the one that got us the maps that we have now. That pressure got us these maps. Also to Katie Fahey, who lives over in Michigan, because even though we don't have a ballot initiative process the way Michigan does, they engaged in a very robust voter education program to get input from voters on what the ballot initiative that they passed and the constitutional amendment that they passed should look like, and we want to be able to replicate that, so we're getting input from voters. And Katie over in Michigan put us in touch with Brian, whose last name I still haven't looked up, who lives in Virginia and was part of the process in Virginia that is exactly the same as Wisconsin. They have to pass a joint resolution twice before something goes on the ballot in order to be voted up or down by the electorate. So that's where we are in that process. So we need folks that help us with that. Also, we don't, the maps that we have now are not gerrymandered, and we have a legislative turnover like we have not seen in this state in generations. So this is from a presentation, I was on a panel after this presentation by a fellow who knows a lot about redistricting from Michael Best Strategies. Historic turnover, in the Senate, the GOP majority will narrow or could narrow in 2024, but there's no path to a Democratic majority in 2024. Democrats could get a majority in 2026 or not, and there are 12 competitive seats in the state assembly. Right now there are 46 safe GOP seats, 41 safe Democratic seats, and then you can see that there are 12 seats that are up for grabs. Well, actually not up for grabs. There are 12 seats that are very competitive. 5 of those, 85, 88, 89, 61, and 26, maybe it's 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of the 12 are open, meaning there's not an incumbent running. Some of those others actually have primaries. So, yeah, so the state assembly is up for grabs right now. It could go either way, and there's a lot of campaigning that's going on. I'm going to skip through these, but you will have access to these slides. This is how you can find your new district. That link takes you to the state legislature's site, and by clicking here, you go to the map, just unclick 2022, click on 2024, and put your address in. So again, you'll get these slides, and so you can take a look at those. This is all the things I just did. This is a different website if you're interested in the demographics of your district. This goes to a site called Dave's Redistricting App. And Dave's Redistricting App, you can accept it. These are very trustworthy folks. And what you can do is change the coloring of the maps to see different things. You can hover over one and see the demographics over here, or you can go here to statistics and see the demographics of every assembly district. And again, like I said, you can trust this. This comes up every time and I have to redo it. I just dismiss it because it's kind of a thing. So those are 2 things that are in here that I encourage you if you're interested, to click around them. So right now, what we are doing, because as I said, our mountaintop goal is this long-term, independent, nonpartisan process. There are a lot of things that we need to do along the way, really increasing voter participation, and that's more difficult than you would think because there's so much intentional misinformation out there about who can vote, who can't vote, are there drop boxes, are there not drop boxes, who can take my ballot to the mailbox, all that kind of stuff. And it seems like it's in the court all the time, so making sure that people know in the simplest terms possible how they can vote. Electing Fair Maps champions, top priority, just like public education champions, Fair Maps champions. And you know what, they tend to be the same, just saying. And then really get engaged and collaborate with the groups that are doing this kind of work. Jill and I work together a lot. She's part of the league here in Dane County and does a lot of work with them, and so we see one another a lot. And then just really kind of help build the stable of volunteers who know about this. This is our timeline, and so this is what we really are encouraging people to do right now. Know who is running. Ask them the hard questions. And we've tried to make it as easy as possible. Common Cause has sent out a questionnaire, not even a questionnaire. It's just an email that says, this is our pledge, do you support it? And we at the Fair Maps Coalition, Common Cause is part of our coalition, we're amplifying this. And I'll just, if I can find my cursor. Go. We are amplifying this. This page here says that JHEC did that, and it links, and that we encourage people to send a follow-up email if they don't see their candidates' names on the list. It links here to Common Cause's website, shows you who's on the list, and we also have, for your convenience, a letter, an email that we ask if you don't see your candidates on the list, that you follow up with them, ask them, let them know you're a constituent. Ask, and also copy JHEC on it so he knows you sent something to them, so he knows that they're getting multiple touches. This is not just him, and they are or are not responding. So we encourage folks to do that, just to make sure that we are, so nobody, no legislator, no candidate can say, this is the first I've heard about this, right? And who else? I have commentary, but I'll hold it. So the Fair Maps Coalition met back in April to develop our strategic plan. We had a goal of distributing 50,000 of these brochures by November. We've already distributed 49,000, and we're not even, today's the last day of July, right? So we said if we got to 40,000 by the end of July, we were going to order more, so we ordered 25,000 more, and we've already put in a second order in Spanish and Hmong. So we have them in English, Spanish, and Hmong, and I have them out at the table. There's a way to order them. Also, we've been doing presentations. I think this is number 24. Our goal is 30 by November. I don't think we're going to have a problem with that. And we're going to be sending postcards to voters ahead of the November election, encouraging them to check that Common Cause website, know where the person who is running to represent them stands on this issue. And then, so here's about the brochure, here's how to order them, and then after November, as I said, we and in the League of Women Voters and the Fair Maps Coalition plan to take our show on the road, because we are not going to wait for legislators to tell us what they are going to do for us. We are going to say to them, this is what we want, independent, nonpartisan redistricting based on best practices and what the people of Wisconsin want. So I really highly encourage you to familiarize yourself with that, get involved. We have regional teams all around the state, and if you're a part of Wisconsin Public Education Network and you come to those meetings, I often come and chit-chat about what's going on. And then I just got to put in a plug for voting no. I would be super remiss if I did not do that, because this never would have been able to pass and be on our ballot if our maps weren't so gerrymandered, right? This was legislation that passed on party lines, the governor vetoed it, and so it's on our ballot. Had to pass 2 sessions by joint resolution, and now we're being asked to vote on questions that will dramatically change the way federal funds, period, not just disaster, federal funds. So disaster relief, infrastructure money, education money, healthcare money, broadband money, lots of different pots of money that come from the federal government. And I don't know if I'm just going to skip a little bit here. These are the groups that oppose it. There are many more. There is a budget process, right? And we're all in this network, so we're familiar with the budget process. Even monies that have been passed through the budget process are being held up in committee, including literacy money for early education, not being released. Not being released, why? Well, certain people don't like certain things about it. As a matter of fact, there's one pot of money that is being held up by an anonymous legislator who doesn't like something about it, only we don't know what that is. And we don't know who it is. So recently, as it relates to the Knowles Nelson Stewardship Funds, the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court ruled 6-1 that the legislature was overstepping its bounds into the executive by not releasing the money. And Rebecca Bradley was the one who wrote the majority opinion. So clearly, we know that we've had a very partisan state Supreme Court. 6-1, that's pretty close to unanimous in saying that this is not right. So in cases of disaster, both Governor Evers and Governor Walker have utilized disaster funds. So there's a lot of ways to take action on this as well. And I can share those with you. I have postcards if you're interested in sending some postcards. They're already labeled. Just write the message. This is a handout that you can use. There's a lot of vote no stuff going on. And that's what I have for you in terms of presentation. But I would really love to be able to answer questions.
Wonderful, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Very welcome. Yeah, I'm honored to be in this work with a lot of really good people. If you do not get our bi-weekly update, it comes out on the 1st and the 3rd Saturdays, please sign up to get that. I'll just pass that around. Because it keeps you up to date on what's going on and what the issues are. And there's always letters to the editor, like templates that you can use to send letters to the editor on various topics. What's happened in the courts most recently related to voter access or to other kinds of things. All those things in our initial mission statement that we work on, try really hard to keep up with those and make sure that folks know. So please, sign up for that. And really, I'm happy to answer any questions or show you anything. We actually have a few minutes. Oh, it's really fast.
I just shout out to Carly, she's an amazing organizer. I joined the group during the pandemic, and I remember being on these Zoom calls that had like over 100 people from all over the state. It was just so awesome and so inspiring, and it's like, I'm looking at your timeline, it's like, oh my God, it's been 3 years like of just this last set of, and anyway, it's really cool to be where we are, where we can actually have a chance of changing the composition of the legislature, but like she said, the work's not done. You got to keep going to get in the nonpartisan redistricting process, because otherwise, who knows where we'll be in 2030 when the next set of maps get
Yeah, I mean, really, our reality now is we are 6 years away from the next census. So, best case scenario, and this is best case scenario, if legislation is passed in the next session and signed into law by the governor, then we have what I would call a backstop. Okay? Then there's a Supreme Court election in 2025, and after that, depending on the outcome, there could be a group that decides to challenge the maps. The legislature cannot challenge the maps, but an outside group could. So there's that looming. So we got to be there's always an election in Wisconsin, I'm sure you noticed that. And so there's that. Then it's possible that a joint resolution could be passed in the 25-26 legislative cycle. Then depending on the results of the 2026 election, it's possible, and again, I'm telling you, best case scenario. 26-27 legislative cycle, it could another joint resolution, or the same, it's actually the same joint resolution. I guess this is timeline from your side. And so then there's not a fall election in 2027, and it doesn't have to go on a fall ballot. So maybe in spring of 2028, there could be a ballot question, a constitutional amendment ballot question on our ballots, and we could have an independent, nonpartisan process in place before 2030. Now that's the best case timeline. And, you know, the state legislature is super skewed right now. As it becomes more in line, and really, as it becomes more in line, legislators, no matter which party is in control, are likely to be more amenable to collaboration. I know that I work with a couple of candidates, and one who's here today, and the thing that she hears most at the doors is bipartisan cooperation. We want bipartisan cooperation. And I think that that's throughout our state. People are tired of partisan gridlock and fighting. And most folks, I mean, there are definitely people who are on the fringes at either end who will adhere to their conspiracy theories and other kinds of things, but most folks want things to work. And right now they don't. And so I am very hopeful. I would not continue to do this work if I was not hopeful. And every time something happens, there are people who show up to either support it or fight it. And, you know, that's a testament to the power of us at the grassroots level. We are the only ones who can say this. So thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'll be out at the table, and I just really appreciate your time and your energy. And yeah, let's do this. Thanks a lot.
Okay, so now you know